The biggest challenge was getting the students. That was, I think, a challenge that we were not expecting. I guess I would call this a successful failure. Sprout had this 100 days grant that they were giving. The goal of this grant was to, within the first 100 days of having President Trump in office, that different organizations would come together in a variety of ways and try to organize something positive with the goal of bringing people together. When I was thinking about the current state of affairs and what's happening in our country right now, one of the things that I noticed and my coworkers and colleagues at Amizade noticed was that we have this kind of polarization that happened in the country. Regardless of what side people were on, if you went on the internet, Twitter, Facebook, anything like that, comments were just cruel. What we realized is that you have a whole generation of possible voters that are now growing up in this environment of almost extreme hostility. So we had these young people the goal was to bring young people from rural communities and young people from urban communities, young people who would be voting in the next year and a half. And the goal was to get them to have very uncomfortable conversations, to disrupt them in a way. First, by having conversations about diversity, race, inclusion, but also providing them with the opportunity to talk about their own individual experiences in their own communities. And then travel. And the travel was sort of to displace them both. Here we're having one meeting in an urban environment where the kids from the cities feel comfortable. Then we're having another meeting in the rural environment where the kids from the rural community feel safe. Then we're taking them and we're going to travel to DC for a few days where they're spending the night and a day and a half volunteering, living, and kind of working together where they're both in an environment that they've never been in before. The biggest challenge was getting the students. We went out to a couple of areas that were 25 to 45 minutes outside of the city. And from them, we got schools that were just like, oh no, we can't do that. And although the schools seemed very interested, they were very concerned about how parents were gonna take it. And there's just as many kids in those communities who don't have access to supermarkets. The schools are poorly funded and don't even have resources to go on field trips and things like that. And so all of these concerns that we have about kids that are living in cities are the same concerns that they're having in rural areas. And, you know, we couldn't get the rural kids outside of the state, and then the urban kids wanted something better, like something bigger, something more interesting.
One of the lessons I learned over the course of the program was the aspect of people finding their niche and like having something that they're passionate about and kind of like using that in like their daily lives.
During the program, we fed people in the Jubilee Kitchen, and that's located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we also got the opportunity to garden in the Indiana Garden in Indiana, Pennsylvania as well.
Growing up, I would have never thought of farming. Like, that wasn't me. I didn't like to get dirty and stuff like that, but now I actually want to like have a little garden area like in my household, or you know, because it's just, I feel like it's a little healthier, and it's more important, especially with plants as well, so it like helps the environment.
The first lesson that I would say I learned is that there are an extreme amount of similarities between urban and rural youth and the struggles that they have. I think that these conversations need to happen, and they should continue to happen. And just because ours didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to, doesn't mean that this isn't still something that's necessary. The other thing that I learned is that living in a rural community can often mean a level of isolation that for someone like me growing up in a city, I'm not accustomed to, and don't necessarily know how to approach or fix. I think our next step is to kind of take a step back and reassess how we move forward. I think the advantage to the fact that although the program didn't happen the way we wanted it to, we were able to work with young people at the university level. And I definitely think after the last election, we have not seen that discussion about what's similar between these two groups. All we hear constantly is the negative and the things that are different. And definitely in these conversations that we were able to have, that's not what I saw. I saw two groups of people that have a lot in common that have never had the opportunity to talk to each other before. The discussion is really necessary, and I'm hoping that it continues.